What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's Motorfest video, I am going to take a look at the recently added Volkswagen Electric R, which I would say right off the bat is going to be a crazy looking car. Like, not only do I really like the way this thing does look, but look at those rims. They look insane. Look at the canyons on the front. Like, you can obviously tell this thing is going to be an insane looking racing car, which because, it is. Now, one thing I would say, though, is look at the size of the back wing on this thing. Like, that is going to pretty much give you every piece of downforce in the entire world if you actually need it. Like, that wing is absolutely insane. It's also, like, really big. Like, you can tell this thing obviously needs downforce. And I would say that's probably going to be something that way the car doesn't, like, fly in the air or something like that. But there is always going to be a reason behind many of those things. And then looking at the interior of the Volkswagen R as well, you can tell it is obviously going to be a racing car at heart because, it is once again. But I do love the way this thing does look inside, and I did notice you do have like an actual speed odometer in there. It isn't going to tell you which gear you're in because, it's, reverse, neutral, and drive. There isn't going to be any gears in this vehicle. Like some of the electric cars do have like one or two gears. This thing is going to be full on drive for that matter. Now for the test drive, I am using a full nitro chemist set on this vehicle. I would also say for being an electric vehicle, it's probably going to compete against the Audi S1 e-tron. That car, from what I have seen in many of the events I've done, and also seeing that thing in Summit, seems to be amazing. But right off the bat, though, I did notice with the electric R, this thing feels like it's basically planted on the ground. And I would also say this thing is going to be really fast. Like, I'm already doing 220. And there's one thing about these cars I'm not a big fan of. I do know, like, the electric cars are, quick. They're going to be one drive, like, almost like the Koenigsegg Regera. But I do like shifting down and up, going around corners, and not really relying on my brakes as much. So I might have to get used to that with the electric R here, but my goodness, this thing is going to be so dang quick. Luckily, I also cannot drive whatsoever on this tiny road. But I would admit, though, guys, driving the electric R right now, I can definitely see why so many people have been running this in the Summit. And I also have a feeling we are most likely going to see more of this car showing up in different grand races because it's going to be that good. And I do think a lot of players are most likely going to want to check this thing out and probably try this thing out as well. I also hit the wrong button there. I would say the sound of the engine, or at least the sound of the electric motors in this thing, does sound pretty interesting. But then again, it's probably going to sound very similar to something like the lovely e-tron. Now I figured what would be a better way to test one of the new cars out than to basically jump right into an event on level 5 difficulty. Now I do know in the racing category, normally the AI don't seem to be terrible. It's probably going to be the racing bikes and also like the hypercars, but when driving the electric R though, I have to admit I can't see why so many people like it. Now we do know this thing is going to be like an actual race car, which I would say is slightly obvious. It is going to feel incredibly planted to the road, almost like it's pretty much sucked into the ground. And I would say that's going to come down to the fact of this car being so low, and also that huge wing, adding downforce to it. Now, one thing I did find kind of insane about this car is you also do not have to mess with the pro settings. I am currently driving this car on regular pro settings right now, and it feels great. Whereas some of the other cars, like for example the Lamborghini SCV12, whatever that thing is called, or even something like the Bugatti Bolide, you probably have to mess around with them to most likely get them to handle insanely well and probably be pretty decent. That would also probably be why many players most likely don't pick those cars in like summits or even like many of the grand races for that matter. But I would say the electric R here is probably going to be showing up in most of the new grand races you are probably in after this car did come out this past Wednesday. Now if you do want this vehicle, all you will have to do is wait a week if you do not have the season pass, which I would have to say definitely wait for this car if you guys want it. The overall ballpark of what this car might cost, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but if I had to guess, maybe around 6 to 800k, it might be a little bit less. I would honestly be kind of surprised if it's like $1,000,000 or something, but then again, it's going to be a really good racing car that definitely does not even need pro settings, and you can easily race this thing around pretty much with having no issues whatsoever. Now, I do feel like this car really is going to be a new top contender in the racing category. Also, first-person mode in this car looks absolutely insane. Now, one thing I have to admit, though, guys, driving these cars in, I know they are electric with obviously, like, one driving gear, but not being able to downshift and stuff and only relying on the brakes kind of is odd to me. I would say, like, driving these cars a bit more, I most likely would get used to it. I also need to get out of first-person mode there, because I cannot drive in first-person mode whatsoever with this vehicle, at least on this race. But I would say though, not being able to downshift and stuff and all that is kind of odd to me. Like I am used to doing that in many of the vehicles. And that way I can actually find myself like being a bit quicker around the corners, or like not really relying on the brakes as often as you probably do. And I would say it's not only going to be better in that aspect, but you also can be a bit quicker. And in return, you're probably going to find yourself being a lot faster in certain corners. But I wouldn't say it's going to be bad though, because all I will have to do is probably mess around with the electric R a bit more. And then boom, I'll probably be a lot better with, actually having to use the brakes. I do admit though, the handling on this thing really does feel insane with no pro settings. Like, I did not adjust this car at all, guys, and my goodness, it handles on a dime. I am also most likely not going to win this event because, well, I think we can all see why right now. But I would say overall though, if you are looking for a great overall contender in the racing category, the new Electric R is probably going to be one of the top cars even against the Camaro SS in basically every way. Now, I think we can all agree that was probably not the best driving you can possibly do in an event with, obviously losing to the AI on level 5 there. But I would admit, though, driving the Electric R is probably going to be a pretty new learning experience for me. And I would even admit in some ways, guys, that's probably going to be why I don't use, like, the e-tron or, like, many of the other electric vehicles in this game. It's not that I don't like them. I'm just more of a fan of being able to, like, downshift or, like, probably controlling the RPMs a bit more around those corners. And that way you're probably not going to be as reliant on the brakes or, like, being able to control the vehicle in a way that you can be quicker, or even go around that turn and go, yeah, if I was in one more gear higher, I most likely could have came out of that a bit faster. But with this thing though, it is going to be electric, so that instant torque is obviously there, and you're going to find yourself pretty much flying out of every corner, even though it is not going to be geared. Now, I would like to know what you guys think about the Electric R in the comments below. I would say this thing is by far going to be worth a look, even if you do not have the Season Pass. Luckily, if you do not have it, you will be able to buy this thing from the store next Wednesday, and you'll be able to add a pretty awesome car to your racing collection.